Hi everyone, this is Andy Tech from Check New Tech, and today we are unboxing the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller. Just want to make sure you guys could see all that. Yes, the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, but this is cool because this one is in camo. So if you managed to get a PS5, hopefully you have by now. We don't have any supply chain issues anymore. You should be able to pick one up, I wouldn't say fairly easily, but easily enough. Might have to go to visit a few stores. I found this DualSense controller at Target. All in all, with tax and everything, it was about $82, and I'm excited to open it up and take a look at it. So on the back, you'll see some of the key features, so I'll read them out to you. It's haptic feedback, adaptive triggers, built-in microphone, signature comfort, and I'm going to explain each and every one of those after I start unboxing this. So they packed it pretty nicely. This was actually... I like that they don't have it in the wrap. I feel like it cheapens the controller. But one thing I noticed just from looking at the box, besides the cool color, is it's got two-tone colors. So all the PlayStation 5 controllers, compared to the PS4 ones, have two-tone colors. This one's camo, so it's limited edition. Don't know how limited it is. Let me know if you guys could find it. Let me know in the comment section below if you were able to find it in your area, if you are interested in it. And here, you can take a look. So the only thing in this box is an instruction manual and the controller. There is no cable. There's nothing else, guys. That's it. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up and take a look at it. And wow, oh wow, that is the Camo PS5 controller. I have to say, aesthetically, it is really pleasing. I love this two-tone color. Actually, it's a bit heavier than the PlayStation 4 controller. Besides the weight difference, the shape is a bit different too. So they kept all of the buttons in the same orientation. So you have the 4 push buttons, you've got the arrow buttons, and you've got the 2 joysticks. Then you also have the touch sensor here and the triggers here. Another change I noticed is there is a USB-C port right there. So the PlayStation 4 had a USB-B, and another huge improvement on this is there's a microphone built in. I'm not a big fan of always wearing headsets, and sometimes I put my microphone down or unplug it. So if you're using a PlayStation 5, one huge advantage is you could actually just go ahead and trigger the microphone directly from the controller, and you have the speaker here. So the cool features, the biggest differences from the PlayStation 4 controller, in case you're new to the PlayStation 5 or haven't had a PlayStation 5 controller, is haptic feedback. So PlayStation 4 uses a rumble feedback, so the whole controller just rumbles. Well, this one has certain areas that will actually give you the feedback. So if you're grabbing a weapon, if you're in a different position, it will actually give you different levels and types of feedback. So it's a little bit more realistic. Adaptive triggers. So the adaptive triggers, what those means, these can actually lock into place. So if you're zooming, it could lock halfway, and then you could zoom out and it could actually unlock these triggers. So there's a lot of creative ways for the game developers to use this. The camo feels really cool. I mean, it looks really cool. Actually, the whole controller feels really cool. I like the grips on it. It just fits really well. I might have bigger hands. I don't know if my hands are considered big or not. I feel like they're average size, but I really like the way this fits in my hand. But I also like the Xbox controller. This feels a little bit more on the weight and the shape of an Xbox controller versus the PlayStation controller. So if you don't like larger controllers, maybe you'll be a little bit disappointed with this one. The other thing that this has, which I talked about, was the built-in microphone. So that's cool. It's right on the bottom here. And signature comfort. They just, talk about the enhanced comfort of holding this. And I feel like I can hold this for a long time. Like, it would be really comfortable to use. I'm going to be using this on Parsec, so I'm going to be doing a couple play tests on it. But it's going to be interesting to see how this fares. I am back, and I had the wonderful pleasure of using the DualSense wireless controller for the PS5, the Camo version, for 2 weeks now, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts and my tech score on this. So here's the controller in my hand. I enjoyed using this because one thing I have to tell you is this fits in my hand perfectly, but I have big hands. So that could be a pro or a con, depending on how big or small your hands are. You may actually prefer a smaller controller. One thing I wanted to do for comparison was bring up the PS4 controller. So the PS4 controller is lighter And one thing I noticed was it actually has a pretty nice, comfortable grip as well. But for this one, the rubber pads are, actually it's not even rubber pads, it's just plastic on the bottom. This one has the rubber texture, so it just feels really, it just kind of slides into my hand, which I really enjoyed using. One thing I loved about this was the haptic feedback. So instead of just like this controller, the PS4, where it just like rumbles and you can't really tell or pinpoint where it's coming from, this one has very specific areas with haptic feedback. So it could rumble slowly on this side and high on this side, or it could be, somewhere in between. So you could tell that they put a lot of quality engineering into this type of controller. They thought about the ergonomics. It fits so nicely in my hand, so I enjoyed using it. Though, the grips, I feel like, pressing these triggers, and especially since they're adaptive triggers, they have a lot more like feedback on there versus pressing these triggers. They were a little bit faster, and they're just kind of like, you could, when you're playing a racing game, you have some versatility, but not nearly as much control. I feel like because of the way they designed the PS5 controller, it was better equipped to handle those types of games, even shooting games or anything. And it could lock in the middle. So if you're like reloading, you could actually lock the triggers. That is so cool. They have control over that. These joysticks are premium. Compared to the PS4, I didn't feel like the rubber around this was premium. These actually, they put this texture around there. I don't know if you could see it, but that's one thing I absolutely loved about this. And another thing I loved a lot, but I did love a lot of things about this, was having the mic in the controller. I don't always like wearing a headset. Now, if you love wearing a headset, you might not even care about that feature, but I like being able to talk to people and communicate just using the controller itself without having to go through all this extra trouble. So that being said, last thing I have to say, this touchpad is actually textured. This one is plastic. So I love the texture around this overall. It's like, I don't know what the material is, kind of rubber, but it actually feels really nice to be able to move. It's a smooth texture. It's not like where your fingers would get stuck on it. Now, a few things I didn't like as much, I have to say. If you have smaller hands, you're not going to like it because this is a larger controller. It feels more like the Xbox One controller. So the size of it is a bit larger. Again, I'll give you these for comparison. You can see there's a big difference there. And then pressing these buttons, even though the buttons are really nicely designed, it didn't feel as free-flowing. And maybe because I'm used to playing a PS4, these felt a lot more free-flowing. So if you are quick to switch buttons, or you're playing Fortnite or any other game, it's going to be, to me, it felt easier to play on the PS4 controller versus playing it on PS5. So that's one downside. Also, I don't know if I like the arrow buttons. Maybe they're in a way, these were actually easier for me to use, and maybe because they stick out a little bit more. And these are kind of like sunken in a little bit more with the texture of the controller. So I felt like maybe that might take practice, but it's one thing that I did not like from the start. And last but not least, I like the way that this controller has this little dip here in the PS4, and you don't have that in the PS5, but even though your hands kind of rest in a natural position, I kind of miss having that. Maybe again, that's just me, habit. It's just a habit that I had with the PS4. But overall, those were the things that I didn't like as much. That being said, the last thing I have to say is I'd have to get a different dock because it is USB-C. So if you are upgrading your hardware, that's not really a factor because you're going to have different hardware anyway. So you're going to have to buy a different docking station altogether. So that's kind of a moot point. That's a lateral move. That being said, what do I think about this controller? I'm going to give it a solid 8.1. I think there's definitely a lot of improvements from the PS4. It actually makes the PS4 controller look cheap and feel a little bit cheap. And I noticed that when I went back and forth, this was kind of slippery on my hands. And I was like, maybe it's the plastic. And, like when you're playing, you have a little anxiety, get a little sweaty. This one will be a little bit better to grip, and you don't really get tired of it. But playing this for long periods of time, if you have smaller hands, I think this is actually going to cause a little bit more fatigue versus the smaller PS4 controller. So is it an upgrade? Absolutely. They did so many cool things with the haptic feedback, the adaptive triggers, the microphone built in, but there are some small downsides. So that's not to say you shouldn't get a PS5 because that's a whole different discussion. But if you are using this controller for something like Parsec or to link to your PC, maybe you like this for something like Luna or Xbox Cloud Gaming, It's definitely a formidable opponent, and I would highly recommend checking it out based on the fact that you're okay with a little bit of a larger controller, but all the other features added in are definitely worth it. I know it's a little bit pricey. This Camo one, I think with tax was like $81, $82, so it's pricey for a controller, but a lot of controllers are going for at least $65 to $70, so it's not that bad of a buy if you're looking at something compared to like the Luna controllers, which don't have as many features as this, or if you're upgrading from the PS4 controller. Maybe use your PS4 controller with your PC. So those are some things to consider. I hope this helped you make your decision on which controller you should buy, and if you should even consider the PS5 controller. If you like this video, please hit the like button below. I appreciate you all, and I love making videos, so hit that subscribe button below. This is Andy Tech signing out.